I'm going to call our panel up so we can talk about some of these other issues that are of concern to so many in our community. So we have Rose Aguilar, who is doing, for media, community, and alternative radio. We have Teresa Sparks, advisor to San Francisco Mayor on transgender initiatives. Ileana Winterhalter, technology, access, and STEM. Please come up so we can begin our conversation. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we're going to begin. We'll begin with Ileana and go to Teresa, and then, excuse me, let me sit down, and then to Rose. Each person is going to introduce themselves and tell us about who they are, what they do, and also what is an issue that is really of importance to you. Because after we do that, we're going to circle back and talk about what are the strategies for dealing with this issue, and what kind of help can we provide, and what are the challenges. So why don't we start? Oh, thank you. With Ileana, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what issues are of concern.
Hi, everyone. Ileana Winterhalter with AT&T. I think I'm the only corporate voice here today and proud sponsor of the Women's Intercultural Network and CAWA and women's policy issues. I've been with AT&T a very long time. I no longer say how long I've been with the company, but let's say it's been quite a while. There's a number of issues related to communications and great initiatives that are underway to expand access for grassroots women and girls, people living in rural economies. There's a number of initiatives that AT&T is active with across the country, and I'd like to detail those a little later. Elmi, you coach me on how much I should speak now. Let me just introduce the company briefly. AT&T is now no longer just a phone company and hasn't been for decades. We're a high-tech communications and entertainment company. A couple of years ago, we acquired DirecTV. That put us in 18 million homes, and also with our own television product, Uverse. Right now, we're just a distribution channel. We don't have any content, but we expect that our merger with Time Warner will close later this year, and then we'll have content. We'll have CNN talk about media. We'll have HBO. We'll have Warner Brothers Studios. We'll have the Turner Networks. We'll actually have content. And we'll have the opportunity, hopefully, to work with organizations like this organization and others on fresh film products and content for television. So very exciting stuff, lots going on at our company. That's just a quick introduction. I would like to let you know that 1/3 of our employees are women, that we have got over 260,000 employees in the United States alone. That does not count our international employees. If the Time Warner merger goes through, we're going to be a Fortune 3 company, no longer a Fortune 500 company. So we're talking big, really big and getting bigger. Our chairman sees no end in sight. I do want to share one program that we've got that might be of interest for the women and girls in the room. It's a low-income broadband program. We offer broadband as low as $3 a month, $5 a month, or $10 a month. At $3 and $5 a month, you're fully functional on the internet, transferring files and that kind of stuff. The speed and the price depends on what's available depending on your location. We also waive the installation fee and the deposit. There's no better deal in town if there's AT&T service. And I'll talk about some more things a little later.
Good afternoon. My name is Teresa Sparks. Currently, I'm the senior advisor to the mayor of San Francisco, Ed Lee, on transgender initiatives, and I've been in that position for about a year. Prior to that, I was director of human rights for the city and county of San Francisco, and I did that for about 8 years. And prior to that, I was head of the police commission in San Francisco, and I did that for way too long. It's an interesting time here. It's an interesting time in the country. Being a transgender person, you've probably heard more and more about transgender issues in the media and in the print media and also the spoken media. But most people don't understand them. I mean, I'll say this kind of as an opening statement, as being transgender is not something that's intuitive. It's not something people just go, oh yeah, I get that. It requires education, and it requires knowledge, and it requires an open mind. But I think we've made a lot of progress. I've been working on these things for over 20 years in San Francisco alone, and there's no question with our communities, San Francisco leads probably the world in transgender initiatives. What you may not know in San Francisco is that 20% of the entire population of San Francisco is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. So that's a lot of people. And that's why San Francisco is such a leader in this area, is we have active, we have visible, and we have people who care. And if you happen to look at any marches today, or you were stuck in traffic anywhere in the city, you may have noticed that thousands and thousands of people came out to fight hate, and not only hate about LGBT, but to fight hate about race and religion and you name it. The opposition, the people who were coming here, hated everything except white supremacy. And San Francisco leads the nation in those kinds of fights. Real quickly, San Francisco, as I said, I was asked to talk about some of the issues facing my community. And most of them be summed up with one word, and it starts with a capital T. Since President Trump, and I use that term really loosely, but since he was elected, we have lost about 50 to 60% of all the gains we made during 8 years with President Obama. For instance, he's basically undone the protections we had under the EOC, which means people can still be discriminated against from a federal perspective pretty much across the country in public accommodations, in employment, and in healthcare. He stopped transgender protections under the Affordable Care Act. And healthcare is now very difficult, and as you may have noticed, he stopped trans people from joining the military, which impacts, by the way, the healthcare provisions for veterans who maybe have already served in the military. He stopped the Obama recommendations on Title IX, which is Title IX of the Education Code, which allowed transgender youth, young people, to be able just to use the bathrooms of their choice. And keep in mind, these are kids who probably at home have been using the bathrooms, and when they were with their parents, using the bathrooms of their choice all their life. Now they're going to school and being forced to use a different restroom. It goes on and on and on. LGBT originally, before President Trump was elected, were going to be included in the 2020 census, national census, so that we finally had an idea of how many people there were, how many of those are, how many LGBT people there are. And Trump eliminated it and said, we don't need that. So now, if you can't be counted, you don't necessarily have to be served. And so, in short, what this administration is doing is trying to basically eviscerate the trans community and by extension, the lesbian and gay community. Let me give you, I'll finish with one thing. Texas was mentioned, and the bill in Texas. Let me give you another bill that was passed in Texas. It was the adoption and prohibition. Lesbian and gay, bisexual, transgender people can be stopped from adopting even a relative if, in fact, the person issuing the adoption has religious objections to LGBT people. Which means if a couple dies in a car accident and their grandfather or their brother or sister is LGBT, the state can stop it and put them into state care. That not only includes adoptions, that also includes foster care. So all of these kids who are looking for foster homes can't be fostered by LGBT people. And this was signed by the governor less than 2 months ago. So it's ongoing, it's everywhere, and and I say this every time I speak, is transgender women are women. And we are part of this community, and in many ways you're part of our community because there are many different kinds of women. And so I look to the Women's Intercultural Network to help us figure out how we approach this. And I'll mention a couple of things the city's doing in a few minutes that I think you might want to also participate in going forward. So thank you very much.
You know, when you were speaking, I was thinking about the amazing gains that have been made. Like on the cover of National Geographic, there was a picture of a trans girl. I think she was 8 years old. And then I was watching the NewsHour last night. And, you know, you have Shields and Brooks who've been there for a long time. And Mark Shields was talking about the trans ban in the military. And he said, you know, and then I know about this one amazing soldier man who became a woman. And then Judy Woodruff ended the segment by saying, yeah, Mark, it's just so important to talk about what's going on with the LGBTQ community. And I thought, wow, just to see that on the PBS NewsHour was incredible. But then hearing what you're saying is just so difficult to hear. And it's hard for me to come up with one issue. I mean, we focus on so many different things. And I mean, we have the environment, we have poverty. I think that a couple issues that really need more attention, and I'm really surprised that politicians aren't talking more about it, is gerrymandering and voter suppression. Because it's so important to remember while we're in this time and depressed and crying that almost half of the country did not vote. He got, 20% of the vote? He got a lot of Dems who are union members, and I'm sure that a lot of them regret their votes. And gerrymandering, even if, here's the thing to think about, in 2018, even if the Democrats get far more votes, they're still gonna lose because of how the districts are drawn, right? They're just drawn like this. They make no sense. That deserves so much more attention. Voter suppression and voter ID laws deserve so much more attention. The last time around, I think people were so humiliated that a lot of them did not vote. I don't know why. If you have connections to the Democratic Party, why aren't they talking more about this? I just don't get it. I mean, these issues are so, so crucial. Half the country doesn't vote. If you look, I think this is a really important point because again, the media always says how divided we are, right? You hear this almost every day. But if you look at where people stand on issues, whether it's the minimum wage, taking money out of politics, healthcare, education costs, raising the cap on Social Security, strengthening Social Security, Medicaid, name the issue. The overwhelming majority of the people are on your side. Overwhelming. The data shows it. Even on abortion, you have the media say the abortion is the most divisive issue of our time. Well, 2 years ago, the Wall Street Journal and NBC did a poll and found that 80% of the population supports Roe v. Wade, the highest percentage in our history. What happens in these very conservative states is the politicians are passing these laws, the laws that you're talking about, the law that now requires women to buy special insurance if they think they're going to get an abortion. This is so extreme. If this law went to the voters of Texas, there's no way it would have passed. When you had extreme laws going in South Dakota, Colorado, Mississippi, the laws didn't pass because the voters said no. They only pass when these extreme politicians vote or introduce the legislation and then vote on it. So I think it's really important to remember that you are the majority and the extremists are still the minority. It's just that they're loud and they have the microphone. The louder you are, the more the media are going to go into you, go say, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? They're not going to ask you to talk about trans issues for a half hour, right? They're going to grab the guy over there who says, I don't want someone using my bathroom. And it's so important to think about how that affects our psyche. Words affect our psyche. This divided thing, we're not divided. It's just half the country doesn't vote. And so I think that's really important because it's so easy to feel like we are just off a cliff, whereas things have been shifted so far to the right. In fact, I remember, maybe I shouldn't say this in this room, but every time I meet a European, they say, a lot of the Democrats here would be conservatives in Europe. Things have moved so far to the right. Even Bernie is kind of a conservative guy in some European countries, right? And here he's off the cliff. Democrats are off the cliff. So I just think that's really important to think about. And I try on my show to bring these issues up. I mean, when you're talking about all these things that he has done, we keep hearing in the media he's not getting anything done because they haven't been able to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Hopefully their tax cuts, not reform, will not pass, but he's getting a lot done. That's the scary part. The media say he's not getting anything done, but he is. I mean, even on climate change, I loved what we heard earlier about the trees. Charlie, that was so beautiful, about the trees as people. Even on climate change, if you read about solar panels in very conservative states, they're doing amazing things. So I just think, I was thinking about this. What do I want to say? I mean, I could talk for an hour about poverty. We just talked about that on my show yesterday, and how these diaper banks are now popping up all over the country because people can't afford diapers. I mean, this is how bad it is. But it's important to remember that if you, just quickly, I took a road trip to conservative parts of the country back in 2005 when it wasn't in to talk to those people. And now all of a sudden everybody's obsessed with the white working class. But when you have a conversation with people who you think you completely disagree with, on most issues, you can find common ground. So I just think that's important, especially as we feel like what is happening and are we ever going to get out of this?
I think you put that very well, and maybe the one overall strategy, and yes, that deserves a hand.